Darkest Dungeon, before you buy. I didn't really want a lot of gameplay in this. I will add some right near the end. I don't really want to show anything because that's going to also kind of be my point throughout the video, is that Darkest Dungeon is not for everyone. So you're going to read throughout the comments where people say, oh, only for masochists and RNG maniacs. Let's bring it down a notch. It's not just for masochists and RNG maniacs. I would argue you may find some bleed over from people who like Souls games and obviously roguelike. If you can't stand people who love roguelikes and Souls games, it might be a small warning to you. My personal experience is I do like the Souls games a lot. I wouldn't say I'm a fanatic of them. I really enjoy them. And I'd argue I'm actually only about lukewarm, if not very fond of traditional roguelikes. I would call Darkest Dungeon more of a permanent choices game rather than a roguelike. A roguelike to me often means you restart once you finish the game or that run, or if you fail something, you go back to the beginning. Darkest Dungeon is not that way. It just has very punishing decisions, but is not roguelike. So let's look at the tags real quick, and I'll kind of tell you which ones are very accurate and which ones maybe we can go back and forth on. Turn-based combat, absolutely. It plays out essentially like a Final Fantasy game. Get your 4 people lined up against each other typically, and then you fight. You'll see that in the footage. Dark Fantasy, yeah. Dungeon crawler, yeah. RPG. Role-playing game, I mean, yeah, I guess. Role-playing game gets slapped on everything nowadays. Roguelike, that's what I'm saying. In a sense, yes, but at the same time, it doesn't have the strong reset factor. You get to save your progress and build upon your progress all the time, which is what I like. Lovecraftian, absolutely. Difficult, absolutely. Turn-based, obviously. Single player, yeah. Permadeath is the one that gets a lot of people. Strategy, yes. Atmospheric, yes. Dark, yes. ND, yes. 2D, yes. Roguelite, sure. Horror, yeah. Gothic, yeah. Fantasy, okay. Except for the Kickstarter part, now that it's been out for a while. All those tags are exactly accurate, so if you've liked games where you played that before, we're on a good start. The next obvious point is I want to get to the prices, and then I'll really get into the gameplay mechanics, but understanding the price is also going to help you. Alright, so as of right now, we got like a pretty much $50, and we got $25. If you're feeling only lukewarm about the game, obviously just get the base game. If you know you're just going to go into it, get the DLC right away. However, do not activate all of it right away. What you can do is I'll click on the DLC here. So the DLC I'm going to recommend here is obviously the soundtrack you just own. Crimson Court, you can actually leave it off but still get the hero, which is really cool because there's a whole separate long dungeon component to that. Shieldbreaker is really cool, definitely keep her on. Colors of Madness, you can essentially keep this on without any issues, and the Butcher's Circus is their PvP mode, as you can see by the tag down there. That's not related to the story at all. Essentially, long story short, Butcher's Circus was the test run for Darkest Dungeon 2 and how trinkets and heroes are going to work. So this is just PvP. I think the current state of the game, if you come new to it, it's going to be rough because people are going to be very good and have all the trinkets and you're not. However, they did fix the server issues, except that I'm not going to go into that anymore. So what I'm doing is trying to go through and just solidify what's on Steam, and then I'm going to give you my personal experience because essentially I want to confirm what is on Steam and if it's true and what's not true about it. So I'm going to pick out some positive reviews, I'm going to pick out some negative reviews, and I'm going to give valid points to both. So I'm going to take this comment right here from this person. Very fun game. Honestly, I had a hard time loving it at first. I did as well. I probably actually had to right around the same amount of hours, and I considered quitting the game for a while, but then I came back, and I have obviously decided to make many videos on it. It was extremely difficult and largely different style than most other games I've played. That's up to you. I don't know what you've played. Once you get the hang of it, it becomes almost addicting. You celebrate your heroes, yada, yada, yada. So essentially the triumph of getting through all the knowledge. I completely agree with that. Darkest Dungeon can be beyond aggravating at the beginning of the game, and once it gets said, I'm going to go find a negative real quick and kind of point out some stuff I think is a little overrated where they didn't give enough chance. So for example, 1.0 hours played. Went on first dungeon type thing. Yeah, hour and a half in, you're probably not going to know what you're doing. 3 heroes died by a heart attack. Stress is very difficult to manage, as the guy said above. Well, I figured this is one of those grind till you die games. Presentation, narrative, overall atmosphere is top notch. Completely agree with this part of the sentence. It's very good, very strong atmosphere. Just not my type of game. I don't know what this individual personally likes. They have 1,300 products on their account, so I'm going to assume they don't have a lot of time to play a lot of games, or they've played a lot of games, and I guess they give the first 2 hours to decide whether or not this is the best game for them. It is grind heavy, I will admit with that. Grind till you die games, your first playthrough will feel like that if you don't seek additional knowledge. And we'll get back to that point soon. I always love picking long rants. I'm not going to read this whole dang thing, but I will read the first couple of sentences just to give you an idea of what some people really dislike about this game. For masochists and RNG maniacs only, I don't know any RNG maniacs out there, therefore, once again, I think it's a little bit of a low stab. And masochist, this is kind of usually a Souls stab where people are like, oh, only Souls people like the clunkiness and stupidity of Dark Souls or Souls-like games, which is sometimes partly true. However, let's just take a couple lines from here and I will kind of say, are they valid or can we get beyond this? So these first two sentences I do and don't agree with. So the game is punishing beyond most games I've played. I absolutely agree. Darkest Dungeon slams you for lack of knowledge, which is why I'm saying if you have a difficulty wanting to look up games, this game will be infuriating. Because if you have, I don't want to say pride, but if you want to overcome and learn on your own, just be prepared. It is brutal. The things you do not know will continuously kill you and set you back on a repeated basis, and it will theoretically waste a lot of your time. I'm going to tell you that up front. There are so many ways to die. There are so many things you can do without ever knowing that will end up probably getting you killed or failing you on dungeons. It's just the way it is if you don't look things up. Therefore, if you have the personality of liking to run your head into a brick wall and over until you do it, Darkest Dungeon is a decent game for you because it offers a lot of challenges for you to solve. If you don't like games that really screw you over with a surprise or something you don't know, be wary of buying Darkest Dungeon or be prepared after getting burned once or twice to go look up self-promotion videos like mine to help you get through the game a little quicker while still enjoying the atmosphere and story. You're going to get messed up at zero fault of your own simply by extreme RNG that plagues the game. I think it is extreme language in that sentence. It's not going to be zero fault of your own. Most likely there's probably party compositions and other stuff that aren't going necessarily well. There are things though you cannot fix at all, and I did actually make a whole video about RNG. I can actually tag those in the description and comment down below if you want to watch them. They will have slightly more spoilers based on mechanics and enemies while watching the video. But if you really want to make sure this game's not mostly RNG, I would go check out those videos. What I will say is the combat you're going to do is actually the least RNG related, though you will see it as the #1 problem on Steam reviews. So people will say combat is all your fault, all your problem. However, it's not. Combat is actually an area where you can reduce the most RNG, and it's outside of combat where you actually find the most struggle. I'm going to talk about this real quick. So, surprise mechanic, yeah, it exists. Essentially, you can get surprised, enemy gets surprises. Yes, the enemy doesn't shuffle because that'd be way too easy. I know some people will say, what do you mean way too? It does. It's just way too easy. And you can never get surprised via scouting. I know I kind of ruined the mechanic, but not really. So there are ways to actually not have your people get surprised. And if you have extremely clunky lineups, you'll get worse on your surprises than normal. Therefore, this person may have very bad party compositions, and when they do get surprised, it really does just ruin them. So I wouldn't say is like a screw you mechanic, and it certainly is balanced, and surprising enemies happens way more than you getting surprised. And this is one of the final things I'll say in this, because this was such a long review. I'm going to mostly stick on this one because they actually hit a lot of common complaints. Therefore, we don't actually have to shop around that much, which is pretty awesome. So, fighting was never fair. Enemies do more damage than you can. Not at all. There's maybe a couple enemies in the game that can exceed your level of damage on a reliable basis. I mean, some enemies can crit you for like 30, and you're sitting there popping off like a 20, 25 crit yourself. However, you can get the stupid amounts of damage extremely quickly. There are times where I barely buff someone, I'm chopping for like a 45 crit, and I'm one-shotting enemies. And if I'm reading this correctly, often 2 or even one-shotting your people. There's only really a handful of characters I know that can one-shot you. When I say handful, I mean like maybe 2 people with certain scenarios set up for them. It's not even like they just wake up one day and kill you. Well, there's one enemy, and we all know who that enemy is if you've played the game. I don't want to spoil it because I want you to find out who that enemy is. But really, then there's another enemy who needs something called a mark to get to that level of damage. So there's really only 2 enemies I'm aware of that can take you from 100 to 0 instantly. And there are ways around those enemies as normal. But yes, if you let them thrive in their natural habitat, of course they're going to blow you away. That's like any video game. If you give the enemy or the enemy player their best lineup and then they wreck you with it, yeah, they can one-shot you. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm really not trying to pick this person apart. They don't understand speed stats. I have this mechanic. Yes, speed can seem irrelevant if you don't understand how speeds work, and especially if you do lower speeds, so people can just kind of go out of nowhere. That's not at all true. If you play the game enough, and if you know how speed works, you'll actually learn how to manage that. So this comment is irrelevant, and I don't think they really understood how speed worked. Alright, so they actually touch on something really good here. The positive and negative quirks at the end of the dungeons are that outside RNG. You can't really ever eliminate the bad RNG on this, so this is honestly one of my main gripes to the game, is that negative quirks can just always come, and they do slow you down, and it is a lot of money. This is probably the very first thing I actually agree with, in terms of just raw honesty. Yes, it's actually extremely frustrating, extremely annoying. You can do all this stuff perfectly, and then bam, one day you still get punished. So be prepared for that. Even if you play the game to what would be like 100% correct, the theme of Darkest Dungeon is making the worst of a bad situation. So there is no perfect situation. Even if you do everything perfectly, your people can come out damaged. If that bothers you, if that will bother you to the point you don't want to play the game, don't buy it, because it's going to happen the whole game. You're going to get diseases and negative quirks. After the end of weeks, you're going to throw them all in, spend a lot of money for playing the game perfectly. So if that is something you know you're going to disdain or really dislike, not even like, oh man, that's annoying, like, why can I never take in my same people? Because they're always in the sanitarium. If that's how you're going to feel at the end of every week, by week 40, you're going to be pulling your hair out and you're going to want to just drop this game. So I would argue if that style or idea will drive you insane, don't buy the game, because you're going to have negative quirks for a very, very long time. So I read ahead here, and this whole sentence is essentially saying early game party compositions are nightmarish. I do agree. It's very difficult to make a good party early, but it doesn't really matter too terribly much, and here's why. If you're not playing on the hardest difficulty, one of my generic tips in any video I make for tips for the game is something called dismissing. You want to take people, use and abuse them, get rid of them, bring in new people, then eventually what you start doing is you go, oh, I like this person, oh, I like that person. And what you do is you eliminate the RNG by grabbing the people you want. Now, that is where the grind aspect comes into. You're not going to get like handpicked like 30 characters. We're going to pick 20 of those at the beginning of the game that you like, and they're going to have all the skills you like. No. You're going to get people you've never seen that you don't like, and they're going to have skills that suck. Therefore, the beginning of the game, maybe the first 5 to 10 weeks really is a crapshoot, but beyond 5 to 10 weeks, you should have a decent party compositions already being made. So I actually pseudo agree with this. However, it's not pure RNG. It's not that you can't make good party compositions. If you like only 7 to 8 characters, yeah, it's going to feel like RNG. But if you learn to use about 12 to 14 characters, you'll be more than plenty finding people coming into your stagecoach. This sentence right here, yes, that's true on the medium to hard difficulty. The easy difficulty, you can break these rules a little more. Making farming impossible. Honestly, you don't really want super high level people going to lower dungeons anyways. The loot is less, the reward is less, so you really actually want people doing at least their skill level, because there's real no point to ever go back. The only reason why this would be really good, I guess, is to put like the high level person and essentially carry up 3 underlings. That is a way you could do it, but it's not that bad. Alright, so the game feels bad overall. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I know they laid out all their reasons. A lot of stuff they said is either just factually not true or maybe not a great understanding. And that's where I come back to my main point. You're either going to bunker down, learn the game yourself, or at least go out to YouTube, find the base mechanics. Because honestly, I see a lot of people complain about base mechanics in Darkest Dungeon, and I will agree with that. Darkest Dungeon did not do a very good job in terms of letting you know what all the base mechanics do and look like in a fight. They'll try with like the pop outs, and they have a book where you can be like, oh, dodge is how much you can dodge, or dodges or accuracy or chance to hit is accuracy minus dodge. You're like, oh, okay, but they never like really like show a great example. And then speed is like the speed in which your character can go. You're like, oh, okay. So when you see a 10 speed lose to your 6 speed, you're like, I have a question. How's that even possible? Because what they don't tell you is how speed is actually calculated. So I do agree that there are certain things that Red Hook could have really done to smooth in some of the mechanics and explain them a little better, so people don't have as many gripes about them. So at the end of the day, they played 25 hours on this game, 6.9 in the last hours. 25 hours probably put them around veteran, which makes me question if they were upgrading their people's HP and all that stuff. Because getting one shot or two shot is just not very common in veteran. And 25 hours in, I doubt they reach champion with how they're speaking here. Therefore, this isn't someone who reached the end game. I'm going to swap over to actual gameplay now for the last bit here. If you've made it this far, what is my final recommendation for Darkest Dungeon? I would say buy the game when it's on sale if you're iffy about the game, because if you don't end up liking it, I think it's like $25-$30 maximum. I don't know. I bought the game in piecemeal, but I don't remember it really costing me above $25 or $30 for the total combination. The game definitely offers a good amount of replayability because your first time through, even if you do look up some stuff, you're going to be stumbling over your own feet so dang bad. You're going to almost want to play a second time if you don't hate the game. If you dislike the game, or if you felt like, oh man, I enjoyed it, but it felt like a chore, okay, that's fair. Because there's the Crimson Court, which I usually tell most people leave until your second playthrough, because your first playthrough, you really just want to learn the curios, the people, the compositions, how the game ends, how the mechanics work, and you don't need the added stress of Crimson Court, because it really does add another level of pain that is very difficult even for a veteran player to initially understand. Therefore, if you're interested in the game, if you don't mind a little challenges, a little permadeath, a little restarting from your mistakes, I think Darkest Dungeon is a great game. I think it's worth the price. And the reviews you see on Steam, sometimes they have merit, sometimes they don't. I hope I explained well enough in the reviews of what I think was right and what I think they didn't really understand or ever look up. If you have the personality where you never want to look things up, this game's going to be brutal. It's just, and not that you can't get good at it and that you can't succeed, but it's going to be brutal because you're not going to know what all the curios do. You're not going to know the percentage of what curios do. You might find out one or two things they do, but not all of them. You're going to walk into stuff that all veterans know are a trap, but you're not going to know it's a trap till you do it. You're going to walk into bosses the first time with possibly the wrong party comp out of pure, and this is where I will say it's kind of unlucky because you're like, well, I don't know what the boss does. So you might bring a really strong like frontline damage comp, and next thing you know, the boss isn't really in the front line. You're just in there going, oh, well, I guess screw me, like I can't do anything about it. So that's going to happen probably a good 5 to 7 times. You might actually beat a boss on apprentice level and be like, oh, this boss is a joke. Get it to it on veteran and realize, oh no, I didn't really understand the boss the first time. It's just so easy in apprentice. I could overcome my mistakes of a bad party comp. It's going to happen. And the veteran to champion jump is honestly where I see a majority of people who play like 50 to 60 hours give this game a negative review. They're like, everything was great, an apprentice and veteran, and then I got to champion. Champion is brutal because it really tests all the mechanics. It tests all of your knowledge and how well you manage stress. And in apprentice and veteran, you can kind of get away with doing really dumb and bad things, but there's almost zero room in champion to keep doing those dumb and bad things. This helped you whether or not you should buy Darkest Dungeon at the end of the day. My short answer is yes, you should buy it. But if you have a personality where you're going to dislike things that are outside your control at all, I would stay away from it because there are many aspects of this game that you can never fully control, And this game was designed to give you a very hard time the first time through, because it's almost like it's kind of like some story games where like after you play through them once, you're like, I could play through it again, but I kind of know everything already. And Darkest Dungeon does have that initial feeling to it, though you can build and expand upon that, and through the DLC, you can almost relive that experience again. So those are my two answers. I've enjoyed the game. It does have a pretty good overall rating on Steam, and I would recommend you follow the more positive reviews than negative. There's always going to be negative reviews, and when there is an RNG as an aspect, some people are going to blame all of their losses or failures on RNG rather than looking introspectively and being like, you know what? I probably could have done this a little different. I probably could have been a little better here. They're just going to say, nah, game's trash. You know, I had like a 75% chance to hit and I missed twice. It's like, well, yeah, you know, it's like statistically, it's not that hard to miss twice with only a 75% chance to hit. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any other questions about the game, how the gameplay goes, ask the community down here, ask on Steam, give me a direct shout out. I'm more than glad to answer because I think this is a great game and I'd love to see more people come and buy it.